Imagine boarding a plane, dressed sharp, ready to lead a global summit. Your seat in the first class is reserved and paid for, an earned symbol of years of hard work and resilience. But as you approach, a man is already there, settled comfortably as if you don't belong. No questions asked, no tickets checked, just a dismissive smirk and a quick demand that you move back. This is Monica Braithwaite's reality. A black woman CEO of a thriving renewable energy company, on a flight that should have been routine, but instead became a profound test of dignity, power, and justice at 35,000 feet. What happens when silent assumptions meet quiet strength? How does someone stand their ground without shouting, when their very presence challenges deep-seated bias? This story is not just about a stolen seat. It's about every moment a woman is told she doesn't belong. It's about the unseen battles fought with grace and the slow but unrelenting rise of truth. Join us as we unravel Monica's journey, a story that will make you question what justice really means and who gets to claim their rightful place. If this story moves you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's start this conversation together. Monica Braithwaite stood near Gate 27A with her leather briefcase tucked against her hip and the boarding pass clutched lightly in her fingers. Her heels barely made a sound on the polished floor as she stepped forward when the agent called for first-class boarding. It was a quiet evening at JFK International, the kind of hush that settles between long-haul departures and red-eyes. The sky outside was streaked in velvet blue, and Zurich awaited. She had made this flight before, not often, just when the summit demanded her voice, not just as a woman, not just as a CEO, but as the face of a company that had reshaped sustainable energy across 3 continents. Her navy suit was crisp, tailored to perfection, with a soft ivory blouse tucked underneath. Her hair was swept back into a low bun, coiled with quiet elegance. Her only jewelry was a wedding ring she hadn't taken off in the 9 years since losing her husband, and a tiny gold pin that read Nova Terra, the name of the company she had built from a coffee shop corner, with nothing but borrowed Wi-Fi and a vision for clean power. As she stepped into the jet bridge, Monica took a breath, not because she was nervous, but because she always breathed when stepping onto a plane. It was habit, a private ritual, for a woman who had fought too long to be treated as a professional and not just a symbol. These small routines were her armor. The flight attendant at the door greeted her without looking up. "Welcome aboard," he said flatly, already focused on the next passenger behind her. She didn't take it personally. She never did. You learn to reserve your energy. Inside the aircraft, the lighting glowed a muted gold. The first-class cabin was intimate, just 4 rows, 2 seats per side, wide leather seats, linen headrests, champagne already bubbling, and some of the flutes perched on tray tables. Her eyes found it quickly row 3, seat A, the window seat, only someone was already in it. A man, mid-50s, silver hair, designer coat draped across his lap like a coronation robe. He had a leather duffel under his feet and noise-canceling headphones already hanging around his neck. She paused, blinked once, then checked the boarding pass again. 3A, still there, still hers. She approached slowly, calm, as always. She had spoken at the UN, had testified before Congress, had negotiated billion-dollar deals in rooms where no one looked like her. This was just another conversation. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I believe you're in my seat." The man glanced up, just briefly. No smile, no curiosity. "This one, I don't think so," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced, dismissive. Monica held up her pass. He didn't look. "I think you might be mistaken," she replied, still soft-spoken. "This is 3A. He gave a short breath, something between a scoff and a sigh. "There must be some confusion at the gate," he said. "This is where I was told to sit." That was when the flight attendant approached. Young, blonde, ponytail perfectly tight. Name tag said Jules. "Is everything all right here?" she asked. Monica turned to her. "Hi. I believe this is my seat." 3A. Jules looked at the man, then at Monica, then back at the man again. Her posture shifted. Slightly. "Sir, you were assigned this seat, correct?" He nodded. "Then, ma'am, do you mind waiting in the back while I sort this out?" Monica blinked. That was fast. "I have my boarding pass right here," Monica said. She held it out. But Jules didn't reach for it, didn't even glance at it. "We just need to double-check with the gate," she said. "Please wait near the galley, and we'll get this resolved quickly." The man leaned back, adjusted his coat, and smiled. Not at Monica, just to himself. Monica stood there for a moment. She could feel it. The weight of 30 years of restraint. The slight rustle of a man in row 2 pretending to read a magazine but not flipping a single page. The sound of someone unwrapping gum just to fill the silence. She looked around. No one met her eyes. She inhaled again, the kind of breath she only took on airplanes, and then, quietly, she stepped aside. Her shoes clicked softly as she walked toward the galley area. She passed rows of faces that refused to turn. She heard one whisper, "Why doesn't she just sit somewhere else?" The plane hadn't even taken off, and already Monica Braithwaite had been told she didn't belong. Again. She stood near the service curtain. There was a small shelf with bottled water and snack trays. A flight attendant brushing past gave her a polite but empty smile. Monica didn't sit. She stood, holding the pass in her hand, still displaying the bold print 3A. It wasn't just about a seat. It never was. She had built an empire from nothing. She had been named one of Forbes's 50 most powerful women in business. But here, in this narrow tube of steel and expectation, none of that mattered. The assumptions were louder. A woman like her didn't look like 3A. A woman like her didn't belong there. But she did. And now, the flight crew, the man in her seat, and every passenger watching in silence were about to learn just how badly they had miscalculated. Monica didn't need to raise her voice. She only needed to wait. Because the truth has altitude, and it always rises. Monica stood still near the galley, her boarding pass loose in her fingers, but her posture firm. The hum of the cabin surrounded her, people settling in, zippers zipping, the clink of ice poured into crystal glasses. It should have been routine, a regular flight to Europe, but the air now carried a quiet tension, like the vibration before a thunderclap. No one had looked at her since she was asked to step aside. She wasn't surprised. This wasn't new. She had been in rooms where her presence made people blink twice, where questions meant for her were directed to her assistants, where CEO was assumed to belong to someone else, someone taller, someone male, someone lighter. But today, it stung differently. Not because of the man who sat in her seat with that smug, practiced smile. Not because of Jewel, the flight attendant, who chose to ignore the truth she was literally holding out in her hand. It stung because it was so ordinary, so effortless, the ease with which she had been dismissed. She adjusted her blazer and checked her watch. 20 minutes until scheduled takeoff. Should she say something louder? She had never liked confrontation. It wasn't fear, it was calculation. Every reaction from a black woman in public was measured, dissected, exaggerated. If she pushed back too hard, would the headlines twist her story into something unrecognizable? She imagined it. CEO lashes out on flight. Woman in power causes delay. The problem wasn't just the man in her seat. The problem was what everyone else saw when they looked at him and then looked at her. He looked like he belonged, and she did not. A new flight attendant passed by, pushing a cart of glasses. Monica caught her eye. The woman smiled gently and stopped. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Her voice was warmer, less rehearsed. Monica smiled softly. "I was assigned seat 3A. Someone else is in it. I showed my boarding pass, but I was asked to wait here." The woman tilted her head, curious. "May I see it?" Monica handed it over without hesitation. The attendant, whose name tag read Lynn, scanned the ticket. Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with something between confusion and concern. "This is correct," Lynn said. "Give me just a moment." She turned and disappeared through the curtain. Monica exhaled. Not relief, not yet. But at least someone had finally looked behind her. Passengers shifted in their seats. Some kept watching. Others sank deeper into their newspapers, pretending not to hear. She glanced toward the first-class cabin. Gordon Slater, though she didn't know his name yet, was now laughing at something on his phone. His shoes were off. He had the look of a man who was always granted exceptions. As Monica waited, she replayed the interaction in her head. "I think you're mistaken. Please wait at the back." It never ceased to amaze her how assumptions moved faster than facts. When she was 11, her teacher once asked if she was in the wrong classroom on the first day of advanced science. When she was 23, she watched an investor leave the table once he realized she was the founder, not the assistant. At 32, she was offered a speaking spot at a tech conference and then introduced on stage as the diversity success story. Now she was 44 and standing in the galley of an airplane, still holding proof that somehow wasn't enough, another breath. She counted to 4 on the inhale, held it for 4, released on 6. From behind the curtain, she heard a whisper, then another. Jules appeared again, flustered. Behind her was Lynn, calm but firm. "Ma'am," Jules said, "I'm sorry for the inconvenience. We're still sorting things out. Could you wait just a few more minutes?" Monica nodded, but this time she did not smile. "Of course," she said. "But may I ask something?" Jules blinked. "Yes. When I first showed you my boarding pass," Monica said slowly, "why didn't you check it?" Jules hesitated. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Monica didn't press. The question was not to shame her. It was simply to place truth on the table. The flight intercom chimed overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are awaiting final clearance from the gate. Please remain seated as we finalize our manifest. We will begin taxiing shortly." The voice was calm, warm, as if everything was fine. But in Monica's bones, she knew something had shifted. She felt the energy ripple. That tiny spark when an injustice is no longer a private moment, but one observed. Someone was filming. She could sense it. A passenger in 4B had lifted their phone slightly, camera angled just high enough to catch the back of Gordon's head. A woman near the bulkhead was whispering to her seatmate. Another man was scrolling through the airline's app, perhaps to verify the seat assignments himself. Lynn returned with a tablet in hand. "Ms. Braithwaite," she said quietly, "would you mind stepping forward with me for a moment?" Monica followed her back toward the front of the plane. The tablet screen showed a digital manifest. Passenger list, seat assignments, there it was. Braithwaite, M, 3A, confirmed. Monica nodded. "Thank you," she said. Lynn sighed. "We're contacting the captain. He will handle it from here." As she stood there, Monica could feel something new begin to rise. Not anger, not victory, accountability. For once, it was not her job to explain, to excuse, or to endure. It was their turn to correct, their turn to listen. She looked out through the oval window. The runway lights twinkled in the gathering dark. Zurich felt far away still, but closer than ever. She returned to the galley, where Jules now stood fidgeting. "I just didn't want to escalate anything," Jules mumbled, eyes down. Monica didn't respond, not because she had nothing to say, but because she had said it all without raising her voice. A seat, a boarding pass, a truth that had waited long enough. She glanced toward 3A one last time. Gordon was still reclined, still smug, still unaware that the air around him had begun to shift. And soon, turbulence was coming. But not the kind measured by altitude, the kind that comes when silence finally stops being an option. Monica remained standing near the galley even after Lynn walked away. The boarding pass was still in her hand, now slightly creased from how long she had been holding it. The corners were softening. It reminded her of the way her spirit sometimes felt folded so many times it no longer kept its original shape, but never quite torn. She leaned slightly against the wall, letting her shoulder bear some of the weight that her spine refused to show. Her feet ached a little in her heels. She had worn them intentionally, a message wrapped in leather and polish. You dress for where you're going, not just where you are. And she was going somewhere that demanded the kind of presence only authority could wear comfortably. Yet here she was, invisible, again. The hum of the plane systems pressed into the silence around her. She watched one of the flight attendants quietly restock the beverage cart, careful not to meet her gaze. The same attendant who smiled earlier but now moved quickly, as if proximity to Monica might pull her into the friction she clearly hoped to avoid. That, too, was familiar. The soft distancing, the reluctance to witness. It wasn't just Gordon's entitlement that hurt. It was the entire structure of silence that formed around it, the way complicity wrapped itself in politeness. No one had told her to leave. They simply asked her to wait. No one had called her a name. They just hadn't used hers. She glanced back toward row 3. Gordon was adjusting his seat controls, face illuminated by the soft glow of his tablet. He hadn't even glanced toward the galley since this started. Monica wondered if he even remembered she existed. She closed her eyes and drifted inward. A memory surfaced. She was 16. It was her first college tour. A professor had offered to escort her and her mother across campus. Her mother wore her Sunday coat, the one with the missing button. Monica remembered the way the professor kept talking to her mother as if she were the one applying. Monica had answered every question, but he kept saying, "You'll want to make sure she gets those test scores in. You'll want to look into the scholarship programs. You'll need to plan ahead." Her mother's silence had not been weakness. It had been instruction. Let them show you who they are. Then you decide who you will be. The memory faded as Monica opened her eyes again. She looked around the cabin. No one moved. A woman across the aisle made eye contact briefly, then quickly looked away. A man in business casual scrolled his phone without expression. No one had come to her defense. Not one. It wasn't that they hated her. That would have been easier. It was that they didn't see her. Not really. Monica felt her throat tighten, not with tears, but with the tension of knowing too much. She had spent her whole life having to be better, quieter, smoother, smarter. And still, she was often treated as the glitch in someone else's system. She glanced down at her hands. Her nails were short and clean, no polish, no frills. Her ring still caught the cabin light, subtle and worn at the edges. Her husband used to say her silence was never empty. It carried storms. He had loved that about her. She missed him most in moments like this. Not because he would have defended her, but because he would have known she could defend herself. And he would have stood by her anyway. Quiet strength always recognizes itself. Another minute passed. She checked her phone. A single message from her assistant popped up on the lock screen. You should be airborne by now. All good, she didn't respond. Not yet. Monica took a breath and straightened her shoulders. There was a line between dignity and erasure, and she had learned exactly where it lay. Choosing silence was power only when it was her decision to make. She turned and began walking slowly back toward the front of the cabin. Jules spotted her first. "Ma'am, please return to the galley. We're handling it." Monica stopped at row 3. Her voice remained level. "I am not here to argue. I am here to sit in the seat I purchased. The seat assigned to me. The seat that I earned." She handed her boarding pass to Jules again, who reluctantly took it this time. Gordon looked up at the sound of Monica's voice. He stared at her, then laughed under his breath. "This is still going on," he said, shaking his head. "Unbelievable." He didn't even try to hide the disdain. Monica felt a chill run down her arms, not from fear, but from the clarity of it all. Some men wore their privilege like skin, seamless, natural, unquestioned. She was not surprised, but she was done being quiet. Jules glanced back at Lynn, who was now walking toward them with a senior crew member Monica had not seen before. A man in a navy vest and silver stripes on his sleeves. His badge read First Officer Dylan Kravitz. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, politely but cautiously. "We understand there's been a seating issue." Monica nodded once and said nothing. Lynn handed him the manifest. He read it, paused, then looked at Gordon. "Sir," he said, "do you have your boarding pass available?" Gordon looked up again, clearly annoyed. "It's in my coat," he said. "I think it's somewhere here." Kravitz didn't reply, just waited. Monica did not speak either. Her presence alone was enough. Gordon reached into the coat beside him and pulled out a boarding pass. He handed it to Kravitz with a shrug. The officer examined it, then looked at Gordon again. "Sir," he said evenly, "your assigned seat is 5C. That's in business class." There was a pause, long and deliberate. Gordon blinked. "No, I was told to sit here, at the gate. They said this was fine." Monica could almost feel the collective breath of the passengers around them. The shift. The moment when denial collides with documentation. "This seat is not yours." Kravitz said again, slightly firmer, "You will need to move." Gordon shook his head. "This is ridiculous." Jules looked like she wanted to disappear. Monica stepped back, just half a step, letting the moment unfold. She had done her part. The silence she had carried was never weakness. It was precision. The flight was no longer just a journey. It was a reckoning, and it wasn't over yet. Monica stepped aside as First Officer Kravitz conferred with Jules and Lynn at the front of the cabin. Her boarding pass was still in his hand. Gordon Slater remained slouched in the seat Monica had paid for, arms crossed, one leg propped arrogantly over the other. He looked out the window now, pretending not to hear the murmurs around him or the tension that thickened the air with each passing second. It was strange, Monica thought, how quickly discomfort became background noise when you were not the one being silenced. The quiet around her was louder than the engines. Passengers weren't talking, but their silence said plenty. Some shifted uneasily, their eyes darting between the crew and Monica. Others focused intently on their screens, headphones plugged in, fully committed to the performance of disinterest. Monica walked a few steps backward and reached into the side pocket of her carry-on. The leather was soft, worn smooth from years of travel. Her fingers found what she was looking for. A slim black wallet with her initials embossed in gold and, inside it, a matte silver card that almost shimmered under the cabin light. She held it for a moment. The Skylux Executive Partner Card, issued only to the company's highest value clients, those with long-term contracts, corporate deals, travel programs that spanned entire departments. She had earned hers 5 years ago after signing an exclusive clean energy conversion partnership with the airline for their ground operations across 3 continents. They had sent her a handwritten letter then, thanking her, welcoming her to their global partners circle, offering priority boarding, lounge access, custom meal services, and, of course, guaranteed seating. They had even added a personal line in the note. "Your presence represents the future we believe in." She remembered reading that sentence twice. Now she was being asked to stand in the galley while someone else stole her seat and dignity in one movement. She stepped forward again, calm as ever, and gently tapped Kravitz on the shoulder. He turned, surprised, and Monica offered the card without a word. His brows lifted. He took the card, scanned the details, then looked at her face with a new expression. It was not quite recognition, not quite apology, but it was something like respect beginning to awaken. "I'll be right back," he said. As he turned, Monica exhaled, slow and deep. It was not relief, not yet, but it was the sound of a woman reclaiming space she had already paid for in more ways than one. She moved toward the bulkhead and leaned against the frame. Her eyes flicked to Gordon. He was still in her seat, now fiddling with his tablet, eyes avoiding everything. There was no shame in his posture, only entitlement, and that was what she understood best, because that had been her greatest adversary since the beginning. It was never just racism, never just sexism. It was the soft permission given to certain people to take up space without ever needing to prove why they belong there. It was the assumed access, the automatic benefit of the doubt, the default of authority. She remembered her first real investor pitch, back in 2009. She had walked into the room with a binder full of climate impact reports and prototypes drawn in pencil on graph paper. 3 men listened, nodding politely. Then one asked if her CTO was joining the meeting. She had looked them squarely in the eyes and said, You're looking at her. That deal never closed. But she closed the next 5. She had built Nova Terra from the ground up, first in New York, then across the mid-Atlantic, then worldwide. By the time she was 40, she had turned a 2-person startup into a multinational firm consulting on clean infrastructure from Oslo to Johannesburg. And yet, here she stood, on an airplane, still having to prove her seat belonged to her. Kravitz returned with another crew member in tow, this time a uniformed gate agent from the jet bridge. He looked slightly winded, as if pulled in on urgency. In his hand was a printout of the flight manifest. Highlighted, verified. Gordon looked up as they approached. "What's this now?" he asked. The gate agent kept his tone even. "Sir, your assigned seat is in business class. 5C. This seat 3A was not assigned to you." Gordon snorted. "That's not what the woman at the counter told me. She said I could sit here if no one claimed it." The gate agent did not flinch. "I checked with the original counter staff. No such instruction was given. 3A is reserved for Ms. Monica Braithwaite under corporate contract." Gordon turned toward Monica now for the first time since their exchange began. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to reassess, as if realizing she was not who he thought she was. "I didn't know," he said simply, but there was no apology in his voice. Monica said nothing. Her silence had more weight than any speech she could give. Kravitz nodded once. "Sir, I need you to move to your assigned seat now." Gordon opened his mouth, then closed it again. "You people are unbelievable," he muttered under his breath, then stood and grabbed his coat roughly. That phrase did not go unnoticed. Monica felt her jaw tighten, but her face remained composed. She had heard worse, and still risen higher. Gordon shuffled toward the aisle, face red. As he passed her, he avoided her eyes. She did not flinch. She stepped past him and returned to her seat. 3A. She smoothed her skirt, placed her leather briefcase beneath the seat in front, buckled her belt with grace and intention. Her body did not tremble. Her hands were steady. A few rows back, someone whispered, "Good for her." Another voice, quieter, responded, "That's who that was." Monica closed her eyes, just for a moment. The leather seat embraced her like an old friend, firm but familiar, like victory earned. The flight crew resumed their positions, the intercom clicked on, cabin secure, ready for takeoff. As the plane began to taxi, Monica looked out the window and whispered something only she could hear. "I do not ask permission to exist." She smiled. The engines roared, and this time, no one asked her to move. The cabin had settled, at least on the surface. The wheels rolled gently along the tarmac as the plane began taxiing, but there was a tension still buzzing beneath the low whine of the engines. Monica sat still in seat 3A, her hands folded gently on her lap, her breathing deep and controlled. She looked straight ahead. There was no satisfaction in her posture, no smugness, only composure. Only the quiet strength of someone who had long since learned that dignity wasn't loud. Around her, the whispers had begun. A man in 2B, dressed in a tan linen blazer and holding a copy of the Wall Street Journal, leaned slightly toward the aisle, just enough to glance back at Monica, then forward again. He shifted once more, then spoke to the woman beside him. That was her seat. I watched it happen. The woman gave a soft nod. "I figured," she said. "He never even showed a pass." Farther back, in row 4, A teenage girl with braided hair tapped on her phone. The screen glowed faintly as she typed out a caption over the short video she had captured earlier. Black woman told to wait while white man takes her seat. He's escorted off 10 minutes later. This is what dignity looks like. Seat 3A. She hit post. Within moments, the first comments appeared, then shares. Monica had no idea she had become a hashtag. She didn't need to know. She wasn't thinking about virality. She was thinking about something much deeper. She leaned her head back slightly against the cushion and closed her eyes. Not to sleep, but to center herself. She pictured her daughter's face, 10 years old. Bright eyes, quick laughter, a sharp tongue that Monica both admired and feared just a little. Her daughter was in New Haven this week, staying with Monica's sister. Monica had kissed her forehead the night before and told her to be brave while Mommy flew across the ocean. Now, she imagined her daughter seeing this scene, watching her mother being asked to move, watching her stand still. Would she be proud, or would she be angry? Maybe both. The intercom pinged overhead. Ladies and gentlemen, flight time to Zurich will be approximately 7 hours and 25 minutes. Please remain seated as we complete final preparations for departure. Monica opened her eyes again. Jules passed by her row slowly. She didn't say anything, but her eyes flicked toward Monica with something that looked like unease. Maybe guilt, maybe not enough of it. Lynn followed close behind, checking seat belts. When she reached Monica's row, she paused. "Ms. Braithwaite," she said quietly, "would you like a glass of water before takeoff?" Monica nodded. "Thank you." Lynn returned seconds later with a chilled bottle and a real glass, not plastic. Monica accepted it without a word. She took a sip and placed it carefully in the holder at her side. Her silence was not cold. It was deliberate. She could have spoken up earlier, could have demanded her seat in front of everyone, could have forced a scene. But that was not her way. It never had been. She believed in timing, in making space for others to realize their error on their own. And when they did not, she believed in showing the truth with evidence, not volume. Still, even in that restraint, there was pain. She did not enjoy being seen as the quiet hero. She didn't want applause for what should have been obvious. Her presence was not a protest. It was simply real, and still, it had to be defended. Outside the window, the runway lights blurred as the plane picked up speed. Monica gripped the armrest gently, the pressure of takeoff pushing her back into her seat. The aircraft lifted smoothly into the air, and the ground fell away beneath them. They were climbing. Finally, when the seatbelt sign turned off, the cabin stirred to life again. Jewel reappeared with the beverage cart. Her movements were methodical. Eyes forward, smile mechanical. When she reached Monica's row, she hesitated. "I'd like to apologize," she said quietly. Monica turned to look at her, calm, focused. "I understand you were just following procedure," Monica said evenly. "But in situations like this, how you follow matters just as much as what you follow." Jules nodded. Her cheeks flushed slightly. I didn't think it through," she said. "I saw what I expected to see." Monica's gaze didn't waver. "I know," she said, "and that's the problem." There was no venom in her voice, just truth. Jules gave a small nod and moved on. Monica turned back to her window. For a while, the flight was quiet. The usual rustling of snack wrappers, murmured conversations, and the occasional cough. Then came a soft voice from across the aisle. "Excuse me." Monica looked up. The man from 2B leaned slightly toward her. "I just wanted to say," he said gently, "that the way you handled that was extraordinary." Monica offered a faint smile. "Thank you," she replied. "I've seen things," he added, "but that was something else. You didn't even raise your voice." Monica took a breath before responding. Sometimes silence speaks loudest when people are finally ready to listen. He nodded slowly and sat back in his seat. And for the first time since boarding, Monica felt her shoulders drop just slightly. She reached down and opened her bag again. From an interior sleeve, she pulled out her speech draft for the summit in Zurich. It was already printed, with annotations scrawled in the margins. Edits she had made at the gate, between coffee sips and gate changes. But now, a new line formed in her mind. One she had not written yet, a line about space, not physical space, not just the seat, but the space a person is told they do not deserve, the space they must fight for, the space they carve out simply by refusing to disappear. She flipped the page and scribbled something down. Sometimes, claiming your seat is the most radical thing you can do. She underlined it once. That, she decided, would close the speech, not just because it was true, but because someone in that room, someone in power, someone with influence needed to hear it, and they wouldn't expect it coming from someone like her, which made it even more necessary. Gordon Slater sat in seat 5C now, not quite slouched, but not fully upright either. The arrogance in his spine had bent just slightly. His arms were folded too tightly across his chest. His jaw clenched a little too long. Every few seconds, he shifted, tugging at the edge of his seat belt as if the restraints themselves were the problem. He had been moved, yes, but not by choice. That mattered to him. From where he sat, he could still see the back of Monica Braithwaite's head 2 rows ahead. Her shoulders didn't flinch. Her body language didn't gloat. She had not once turned around since returning to her rightful seat. She had not looked at him, not even when he was escorted back. That silence was louder than any insult he had expected, and it unsettled him. Gordon wasn't used to being the one corrected. He had built his reputation on confidence, deals, persuasion, hedge funds, strategic takeovers, billion-dollar acquisitions. He moved in the kind of circles where power didn't always come with politeness. He told himself it was just a mistake, just a simple seating error. Anyone could have made it. But the facts kept whispering against his pride. He had not shown his pass. He had taken the seat because he believed he could, and no one stopped him. Not until she did. Now passengers were watching him, or worse, deliberately avoiding him. He could feel it. He had become the man who tried to steal a seat from a black woman and got removed. He could almost hear the TikToks being made, the hashtags. He didn't know for sure, but the digital age was merciless. His throat felt dry. He pressed the call button above his head. Lynn arrived. Calm, professional. "May I have a whiskey?" he asked, voice low. She nodded without expression and walked away. While waiting, Gordon pulled out his phone and flipped it to airplane mode just long enough to see the last few notifications roll in. One text from a colleague read, "What happened on that flight?" He swallowed hard and turned the screen off. He hated that question more than any insult, because it meant people already knew something had happened. Lynn returned with the drink and placed it on his tray table. Gordon gave a stiff nod, then sipped it quickly. The liquid burned. That was good. It helped dull the tightness in his chest, but his thoughts remained tangled. Why did she look so calm? Why didn't she argue he expected protest, anger, a confrontation that could have justified his assumption that she was dramatic, reactive, difficult? Instead, she had shown him a card, a boarding pass, and the truth, nothing more. That restraint was surgical, and it disarmed him in a way he couldn't explain. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his original boarding pass. It stared back at him. 5C, no mistakes, no gray areas. His cheeks flushed, not with guilt, but with a type of embarrassment that gnawed deeper, the kind that comes when you know you're not just wrong, but publicly, undeniably, and permanently so. And she had not needed to raise her voice to do it. He could not remember the last time a woman made him feel this small without even speaking to him. It irritated him, more than he wanted to admit. He looked up again. Monica remained still, focused. He watched as she scribbled a note into her folder. Her handwriting was small, deliberate. He imagined she was preparing some cutting article for a journal, maybe writing a speech that would become viral. Maybe she would go on television. Maybe she would name him. He took another sip and clenched his teeth. She wouldn't forget this. People like her never forgot when someone like him tried to put them in their place. And worse, she hadn't retaliated. She had let the facts speak, let the silence hang. And now she was winning a war he didn't even know he was in until it was over. Gordon had been raised to believe that men like him earned their space, that if you walked like you owned something, people rarely questioned you. But this woman, this stranger in a navy suit with nothing more than patience and a platinum badge, had undone that illusion in front of an entire plane full of strangers. His fingers tapped anxiously against his tray table. He looked down at his whiskey. The ice had begun to melt. The fire in his chest had dulled to a hollow cold. He stared at the overhead light, the one above her row, still glowing softly. She had not even touched the call button once. She did not need service. She had already served her presence. And the plane, for all its altitude, suddenly felt too small for him. His thoughts turned to what might happen next. Would the airline follow up? Would someone call? Would she sue? Or worse, would she say nothing and let the internet do the talking? That possibility disturbed him more than anything. Silence couldn't be controlled. Words could be denied, reframed, reinterpreted, but silence, especially hers, was like a mirror, and he hated the reflection. He looked around at the cabin. Other passengers were pretending to read, nap, type, but he knew some of them had recorded the moment, the awkward exchange, the flight attendant scrambling, the officer correcting him. He had built a career on being composed, persuasive, a strategist, but there had been no strategy for this, just impulse, just the assumption that he could take the seat because he looked like he belonged in it. That assumption was now unraveling in front of him. He hated it, but deep down, under the resentment and denial, was a tiny flicker of recognition. He had been wrong, not just about the seat, but about her. He didn't know her story, but he had seen enough to know she had carried more than a boarding pass onto that plane. She had carried years, maybe decades, of being overlooked, undervalued, told to wait, and still, she had never flinched. That kind of strength wasn't common. It was learned, earned, and it was the kind of strength that didn't need to shout to be heard. He finished his drink, then placed the empty glass back on the tray. He leaned back and closed his eyes, not to rest, but to avoid the truth that lingered in the silence around him. There would be consequences, whether through headlines or conscience. Either way, the ripple had begun, and Monica Braithwaite was not going to fade into the background. Not now, not ever again. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the plane glided through the darkness like a secret. The cabin lights were dimmed now, replaced by the soft blue glow of aisle markers and scattered reading lamps. Passengers had shifted into that quiet, suspended state of long-haul travel, sleep masks pulled down, screens flickering with movies no one really watched. The world outside was a velvet sky, the moon casting a soft shimmer on the engine casing just outside Monica's window. She sat in seat 3A. Still, her body relaxed, but her mind far from it. Monica stared at her hands, resting gently on the armrest. They looked calm, capable. But she knew what they had carried. Not just luggage, not just leadership, but years of being questioned, years of being underestimated in boardrooms and bypassed at airports, years of translating her anger into poise, because the world had never made room for her rage. A blanket rested across her lap. She had not asked for it. Lynn had quietly placed it there about 30 minutes earlier without saying a word. Monica had nodded. That was enough. The air was cool, but not cold. Still, something inside her felt unsettled. She had won. Yes, the seat was hers. The confrontation had been handled, but the residue remained. It always did. She turned her face toward the window again. The stars looked clearer up here, like truth itself was easier to see from altitude. She traced one with her eyes and then let herself drift, not into sleep, but into memory. There had been a moment when she was 31, fresh off a keynote speech at a green tech conference in Chicago. She had been wearing a navy blue dress that hugged her figure and a pair of glasses she didn't need, but wore to be taken seriously. After the panel, a man had approached her not to ask about her ideas, not to challenge her thinking, but to compliment her grace under pressure and ask who had written her speech. She had blinked, smiled politely, and said, "I did." He looked surprised, not embarrassed, just surprised. She had walked away feeling both affirmed and invisible at once. Now, years later, she felt a familiar echo of that moment on this flight, because what had happened wasn't just about a seat, it was about space, about the assumption of who belongs where, about the permissions silently granted to one body and denied to another. Her calm was not compliance, it was strategy, and her silence had never been surrender, it had been survival. She leaned back and closed her eyes briefly, just long enough to quiet the noise in her mind. She heard footsteps approaching, slow and tentative. Then a voice, "Excuse me, Ms. Braithwaite." It was Lynn. Her tone was softer than earlier, more human. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I just wanted to check if there's anything else you might need." Monica opened her eyes and met her gaze. "No," she said gently. "Thank you. You've been kind." Lynn hesitated, then lowered her voice a little more. "I saw what happened earlier. I just want you to know. Not everyone here agrees with how it was handled." There was something fragile in her expression, a hint of apology without the words. Monica gave a small nod. "I know." Lynn's shoulders relaxed. She seemed relieved, though she didn't quite smile. "I hope you get some rest," she said before walking away. Monica turned her gaze forward. Ahead of her, passengers in the first row were asleep. headphones resting around necks, bodies leaned at awkward angles. To her left, the aisle was empty, but behind her, 2 rows back, she knew Gordon was still awake. She could feel it. And sure enough, in the reflection of her window, she caught a glimpse of him, elbows tight to his sides, head tilted slightly forward, staring blankly ahead. He had not spoken since being moved, and he had not apologized. Not that she expected him to, but part of her, a very small part, wondered what it would sound like if he did. Not for the performance of it, but for the humanity. Would it change anything? Would it lighten the weight in her chest? She doubted it. There were things that sorry could not undo. Not when the insult was centuries old. Not when the shame was generational and systemic and still very much alive. She looked away from the window. Instead, she opened her folder again. Her speech for the Zurich summit lay inside. Annotated in black pen and highlighter, it was good, solid, focused on energy reform, global partnerships, the need to shift supply chains. But now, it felt too safe, too polished, too absent of the fire she carried. She flipped to a blank page and began to write. She didn't change the data, she didn't touch the science, but she added a paragraph, a single, focused reflection on what it meant to sit at the table, not just professionally, but physically, because people talked a lot about representation, about optics, about progress, but they rarely talked about the exhaustion, about the small daily humiliations that chipped away at brilliance, about the 1,000 ways black women had to be excellent just to be allowed to stay in the room. She paused, then wrote another line. Progress is not measured by the number of seats filled, but by how many are no longer questioned when we claim them. She read it twice, then underlined it. That, she thought, was the real keynote. The plane shifted slightly, turbulence brushing against the fuselage like a warning. She didn't mind. She had weathered worse. She closed the folder and rested her hands again in her lap. Ahead of her, a baby had begun to cry softly. Monica smiled. Life, she thought, always finds its way into quiet moments. As she reached for her water, a hand gently tapped her shoulder. She turned. It was the man from row 2 again, the one who had complimented her earlier. Sorry, he said softly. I didn't mean to bother you. I saw the way you wrote that line. He nodded at the folder in her lap. I was behind you when you wrote it. That thing about seats. Monica said nothing, waiting. It was beautiful, he added, and true. She gave him a quiet smile. Thank you, she said. It came from a long way down. He nodded again, then returned to his seat. As Monica settled back in, she felt something unexpected. Stillness. Not peace, not yet, but stillness. The kind that comes after standing your ground and realizing you don't owe anyone anything more than the truth. She closed her eyes again, and this time she did begin to rest. The plane had been in the air for just over 2 hours when the murmurs started again. It began as a quiet shift in the atmosphere, a change in the rhythm of the cabin. Something was stirring. Monica sat upright now, no longer resting, her senses alert though her posture remained composed, her body still, but her spirit attuned. The stillness was deceptive. It carried a current beneath it. She could feel it rising again. Jules walked briskly past her row, her eyes set forward, but her hands fidgeting as she adjusted her uniform near her waist. A minute later, Lynn followed, carrying a tablet and stopping at the bulkhead to tap the screen repeatedly. Her brows furrowed. Monica didn't need to look. She already knew. Something had been reported. Something had reached the cockpit, and Monica had an instinct for moments like these. She had spent years navigating crisis management, reading the subtext in corporate meetings, and watching how chaos rippled beneath calm surfaces. It was the same energy now. A low ding came over the speaker, then another, then silence. The usual comfort of in-flight entertainment screens was gone in many seats. Some had gone black, others were paused, mid-scene. Monica glanced to her left. A woman 2 rows behind was whispering into her phone, likely crafting a tweet that would get shared before landing. Another man leaned forward from his seat, trying to get a better look at the front of the plane. It was subtle, but it was building. Then she heard it. A new voice entered the cabin. Not a flight attendant, not a passenger. It was firm, measured. "Sir, please remain seated until we speak with the captain." It came from the direction of 5C. "Gordon." Monica didn't turn around. She didn't need to see his face to understand the discomfort in his voice. "I told you," he said sharply. "This is ridiculous. I already moved. What now?" A different voice answered, calm but unmistakably authoritative. "There's been a formal complaint, and we've reviewed the flight manifest. The captain has asked that you speak with him before we proceed further. I'm not leaving my seat again." Gordon barked. "I complied earlier. Isn't that enough?" There was a pause, then footsteps. Monica sipped her water and folded her napkin. She placed it down deliberately beside her folder. Her hands were steady. Her heart beat calmly, though every part of her was listening. It was unfolding just as she had expected, but not because she had asked for it, because the truth, once revealed, moves with its own momentum, and she had let it speak. First Officer Kravitz appeared at her side a moment later. He crouched slightly so his voice could meet her ear, without drawing more attention than necessary. "Ms. Braithwaite," he said. "Would you mind stepping into the galley for a moment?" Monica met his eyes. They were serious now. Not tense, not afraid, but present. She nodded and rose without a word. The cabin followed her movements. A dozen sets of eyes lifted. Some passengers watched curiously. Others subtly unlocked their phones. As she passed row 5, Gordon did not meet her gaze. His arms were folded again, tighter than before. He stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. The officers, dressed in discreet Navy security uniforms, stood behind him, blocking the aisle just enough to make a statement. Monica entered the galley and stood beside the wall as Kravitz joined her. Lynn was already there, holding the manifest. She gave Monica a look part apology, part respect. "We've confirmed everything again," Kravitz said, "and we've received several reports from passengers who witnessed the exchange earlier. Some even submitted video footage to our in-flight messaging system." Monica said nothing. She didn't need to speak. "The captain believes it's in the airline's best interest to formally deplane Mr. Slater once we land in Reykjavik for refueling," Kravitz continued. "But he's also given us discretion to act sooner if necessary." Monica raised her eyebrows slightly. Reykjavik, Kravitz gave a small nod. "Unexpected headwinds. We're stopping for fuel. You'll still arrive in Zurich on schedule." Monica folded her arms gently. "What's your protocol if he refuses to cooperate?" "We have jurisdiction at cruising altitude," Kravitz said, "and in this case, the documentation and passenger testimonies are overwhelming." He looked at her carefully. Do you wish to pursue further action? You're under no obligation." Monica paused. Her eyes drifted to the side. For a moment, she said nothing. Her fingers touched the edge of her leather folder again, the one with her speech, the one with her truth scribbled on its pages. She thought of her daughter. Then she shook her head. "I don't need an apology," she said. "I don't need theater. I just want it known that this happened, that silence does not mean permission, and that some of us are done pretending that dignity has to earn its way through a gate." Kravitz nodded. Lynn swallowed hard. "We understand," he said. "We'll proceed accordingly." As Monica returned to her seat, the officers followed behind her. They stopped at row 5. One of them leaned in and spoke directly to Gordon, his voice too low to be heard by most. Gordon raised his voice. "You can't be serious. I didn't commit a crime. This is insane." The other officer replied calmly, then reached for Gordon's carry-on. Gordon stood abruptly. "This is overkill," he spat, but his voice lacked weight now. He sounded like a man cornered by a truth he no longer knew how to outrun. The cabin had gone still. Everyone was watching. Some leaned forward. Others tried to act disinterested but failed. A camera clicked somewhere behind them. Gordon was escorted up the aisle slowly. One officer in front, one behind. As he passed Monica's row, he looked her way for a brief moment. She did not return his gaze. She simply sat with her back straight, her eyes fixed on the front of the cabin. A few rows behind, someone began to clap, just once, then twice. Then silence returned. Monica exhaled slowly. The weight in her chest lifted just slightly, not because he was gone, but because the moment had passed without her ever having to shout. She had stayed composed, and still, justice had moved, not loudly, but fully. The intercom chimed again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are resuming normal flight service. Thank you for your patience." Jules passed by a few minutes later, her expression unreadable. Monica said nothing. She no longer needed to. The plane was in motion, and so was the truth. The hum of the plane had shifted. It was still the same sound of jet engines gliding above the Atlantic, but something in the cabin had softened. The tension that once wrapped itself around the rows like static had begun to release. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was quiet. And for Monica Braithwaite, that was enough. She sat in 3A, her seat reclaimed, her posture composed. The officers had taken Gordon Slater away just 20 minutes earlier. Yet it already felt like a lifetime had passed. She had not moved since. She didn't need to. The seat cradled her now. Not like a luxury, but like a promise. It belonged to her. Not because of a name on a pass, not because of the silver card or her contracts or her CEO title. It belonged to her because she had earned it in every way that mattered. She adjusted her blanket, sipped the last of her water, and reached again for her folder. Inside were her notes, clean and methodical. Her pen rested neatly in the crease, but now there was a single page clipped to the top, the one she had written from the heart. It was folded once, slightly imperfect, like the most honest things often are. She unfolded it and read the words again. "Progress is not measured by the number of seats filled, but by how many are no longer questioned when we claim them." Monica traced the sentence with her eyes. The lights above the cabin glowed dimly. She glanced across the aisle and saw the businessman in 2B again. He was not pretending this time. His head turned toward her, gaze steady, He gave her a small nod, no words, just acknowledgement. She nodded in return, and that was enough. In row 4, the young woman who had posted the video earlier now sat typing furiously into her phone again. Monica did not know it yet, but the clip had already been viewed over 300,000 times. By the time the flight landed in Zurich, it would be at 1 million. The world would know what had happened on this flight, not because Monica had spoken, but because someone had chosen to see. That was always the difference. The world did not change with shouting. It changed when people began to notice the things they used to overlook. A few minutes later, the aisle grew active again. Lynn pushed a fresh cart forward, offering tea, water, and warmed towels. When she reached Monica, she placed a fresh cup of chamomile on the tray table without asking. "I thought you might prefer something gentle," Lynn said softly. Monica smiled. "Thank you." Lynn hesitated. "It's been a long flight already. I just want to say, I'm glad you didn't let it go." Monica looked at her and held the moment before replying. "I've let too many things go in my life. This one needed to stay with me." Lynn nodded and continued down the aisle. The tea was fragrant and soft, the warmth spreading through Monica's chest with each sip. She felt herself exhale, not dramatically, but quietly, like pressure releasing from a valve that had been sealed for too long. It was not the first time she had stood her ground, but it was the first time the ground stood still with her. For years, she'd been told she had to be better, smarter, more prepared. She had done it all, and yet still found herself having to prove the obvious. But this time, for once, the world around her had paused, looked, listened, and responded. That mattered. The pilot's voice came over the intercom again, this time softer, more human. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we make our way toward our refueling stop in Reykjavik, we'd like to thank you for your patience. We'd also like to remind everyone that respectful behavior is not just encouraged on our flights, it is expected." There was a beat of silence afterward, then a few scattered claps, subtle, reserved, but meaningful. Monica looked up, then slowly turned her head toward the aisle. The woman sitting in 1D, an older woman with gray hair tied back in a silk scarf, gave her a small smile. "I saw what you did," she said, "and I'll remember it." Monica held her gaze. "I hope it helps someone else do the same." The woman nodded. Monica turned back toward her tray and picked up her pen. She began to write again. Not a speech, not a statement, just a thought, a reflection. We often speak of power like it lives in the loudest room, but it can also be a woman who chooses not to move when she knows she is already where she belongs. She paused, then added another line. "I was not waiting for permission. I was waiting for the world to catch up to the truth I already knew." She smiled, almost involuntarily. For a moment, she allowed herself to rest back into the seat, to take in the quiet around her as a kind of affirmation. The stars outside the window were clearer now, higher, and it struck her then how poetic it was, to rise through clouds while reclaiming her own ground. She looked down at her lap, at her folder filled with notes, scribbles, truths. She thought of all the women who had taught her what dignity looked like. Her mother, who raised her with 2 jobs and still braided her hair every Sunday night. Her grandmother, who cleaned houses with hands cracked from bleach but carried herself like royalty. Her first mentor, who told her at 23, "Never beg anyone to see you. Shine until they have no choice." She was all of them now, wrapped in navy blue, sipping tea, cruising at 35,000 feet with the world watching. She did not smile for the camera. She smiled for herself. Behind her, a flight attendant whispered something to another. A man in row 6 muttered, "That's what happens when you think rules don't apply." And a child asked their mother, "Why did that man have to leave? Because he forgot to be kind." The mother answered softly. Monica closed her eyes, and for the first time in hours, she allowed herself a real exhale, one that didn't carry the burden of restraint. Just air, just peace, just altitude. By the time the plane descended toward the icy runway in Reykjavik, the outside world had already caught up. It began quietly, as things often do. A post shared by the young woman in row 4, a short video, just under a minute long, showing a calm black woman standing with a boarding pass in hand, while a white man lounged in a seat he had not paid for. The clip ended just before the man was escorted away, but the context was clear. The caption read, "She showed her ticket. He refused to move." Then the world watched. Seat 3A. It spread like wildfire before the plane's wheels touched the Icelandic tarmac for refueling. Monica Braithwaite's name was trending. Her assistant, Jordan, received the alert first. He was seated in his apartment in New Haven, reviewing travel schedules when his phone buzzed. Then again, messages flooded in from colleagues, journalists, friends, even distant contacts from business school. Jordan opened the clip and stared in silence as the moment played out on screen. He didn't need to watch it twice. He already knew that composed posture, that calm gaze. That way, Monica held herself when the room began to shrink around her, but she refused to shrink with it. He picked up the phone and called her. It rang once, then disconnected. Airplane mode. Of course. He sat back in his chair, thinking. The internet was already assigning meaning. Think pieces were forming. People were debating intent, policy, corporate culture. But for Jordan, it was simpler. This wasn't a story. This was Monica being Monica. Back on the plane, Monica stood near the restroom at the front cabin, stretching her legs. The stop in Reykjavik had not been planned, but it was uneventful. Most passengers remained on board while fuel lines hissed softly outside. Lynn passed by with a tablet in hand. Monica noticed the alert glowing on the corner of the screen. It was her name. Lynn caught her glance, paused, and tilted the screen slightly away as if shielding her from something harsh. But Monica smiled softly. "It's fine," she said. "People were always going to talk. Let them." Lynn looked at her for a moment, then nodded. Monica returned to her seat, settled back in, and pulled her phone from the side pouch. She switched off airplane mode briefly, not to scroll, but to check for Jordan. A single message blinked on the screen. "You're all over the news. You okay?" She typed 2 words, still flying. Then she powered the phone off again. Across the cabin, the businessman in 2B opened his laptop, now logged onto the in-flight Wi-Fi. His face changed as he read the article from a major news outlet, a screenshot of Monica's boarding pass, a blurry frame of her standing, hands composed, expression calm. He leaned slightly toward her seat. "I hope you know," he said. "Your story's already out there." Monica turned her head slightly but did not fully face him. "I figured it would be." He paused. "I think it's reaching people." Monica nodded. "Good. Maybe next time, someone won't have to stand at all." The cabin doors closed again. The crew made their rounds. The lights dimmed as the plane prepared to lift off once more. As they climbed back into the dark sky, Monica opened her folder again. This time, she didn't write. She read, slowly, carefully, preparing for the summit the way she always did, with intention and thoughtfulness. But now her speech had another layer to it, like sunlight filtering through stained glass. She knew the cameras would be on her in Zurich, not just because of who she was, but because of what had happened at 35,000 feet. She also knew people would ask why she hadn't made a statement, why she hadn't posted, why she hadn't gone live or issued a press release. They would not understand that silence was not an absence, it was a strategy, and sometimes it was the statement itself. A young man from row 6 approached timidly, pausing near her row. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said. "I just wanted to say thank you." Monica looked up. "For what? For not letting it slide?" "My mother, she deals with that kind of thing all the time, but she never says anything. I think she's just tired." Monica gave him a soft smile. "I understand that." He hesitated. "I recorded part of it too, but I didn't post. I didn't think it was my place." Monica studied his face. "You don't always need to post," she said. "Sometimes just remembering is enough. Remembering and choosing to act differently when it's your turn." He nodded and returned to his seat. The moment lingered in the air. Monica leaned back and closed her eyes. The hum of the plane returned, steady and smooth. She could feel the altitude now, not just physically, but spiritually. Something had lifted. For so long, she'd carried the weight of proving herself in every room, in every conversation. Her skin, her gender, her presence all questioned before she even spoke. But now the truth was out in the open, and she had not had to scream. She had not had to demand. She had simply refused to move, and the world had moved around her. As the hours passed and the plane moved eastward, more people across the globe began sharing the story. Black mothers texted their daughters. College students debated the moment in group chats. Activists wrote essays on quiet resistance. Business leaders drafted internal memos about bias and boarding policies. And through it all, Monica remained still, unaffected, unapologetic, unbothered, because the noise outside could never shake the clarity she carried within. The captain announced the final descent toward Zurich. Passengers stirred, seats clicked upright, windows opened one by one. Monica took one last look at the folded note in her folder. Then she slipped it into the back pocket of her speech binder. She would not read it aloud. She would not refer to it. But she would carry it, like a compass, like a memory, like a reminder that her presence was no longer a negotiation. As the wheels touched down in Switzerland and the plane slowed on the runway, Monica looked out at the dawn light breaking over the hills. She smiled, because she knew the world had seen her. But more importantly, she had seen herself. The Zurich Convention Center shimmered in the morning light, its glass walls reflecting the soft gray of the Swiss sky. Inside, the lobby was alive with movement. Name tags swayed from lanyards. Espresso cups clinked on saucers. Conversations flowed in 4 languages at once. Global leaders, investors, and innovators had gathered for the World Sustainability Forum, a summit of ideas, vision, and influence. Monica Braithwaite stood in the green room, still and quiet. Her hair was pulled back into a clean twist, a single silver pin holding it in place. Her navy blazer had been pressed by hand that morning, every line sharp, every fold purposeful. She wore small pearl earrings and flat black heels. Her posture, as always, was effortless. She was ready, but not just for the speech. She was ready to take up space. Jordan stood beside her, holding a clipboard and checking the schedule. "You go on in 7, he said softly. "They bumped the finance panel so you'd have the full 25. Monica smiled faintly. "Good. It's time sustainability stopped getting slotted behind the money talk." Jordan hesitated. "They're going to ask about the flight," he said. "I know. Do you want to address it?" Monica looked into the mirror one last time. "No," she said. "They'll hear what they need to hear." The stage manager stepped into the room. "Ms. Braithwaite, we're ready for you." Monica walked toward the side curtain with calm steps, her folder in one hand and her presence unfolding before her like light. The stage was wide, clean, minimalist. Behind her, a screen displayed her name in bold letters, Monica Braithwaite, CEO of Novaterra Industries. As she stepped to the center and faced the crowd, the light shifted and applause filled the hall. It was polite at first, then stronger, then sustained. She waited, poised, until it quieted. Then she spoke. "Good morning." Her voice was steady and low, every syllable deliberate. "I stand before you today not just as a business leader or a speaker on energy policy. I stand here as someone who understands what it means to earn a seat, and to have that seat questioned, over and over again." A ripple moved through the room. She continued. "We speak often of innovation, of future-forward design, of transforming the systems that no longer serve the planet or its people. But we rarely ask the deeper question, who gets to build that future? Who gets to lead in it? Who gets to be seen as legitimate when they walk into the room?" She paused. Some in the audience straightened. Monica moved forward one small step. Technology is neutral, but systems are not, and neither is opportunity. She let the silence land before continuing. "When we talk about global partnerships, when we talk about building bridges across continents and economies, we must remember that some people are still building bridges just to be heard. Some of us have been architects of solutions for decades, and yet we are treated as passengers rather than pilots." Her voice was calm, measured, but beneath it flowed a current of steel. Monica opened her folder and lifted one page. "This is the opening line from our latest climate report. Equity must live at the center of every sustainable solution." And I believe that line extends beyond climate. It extends into policy. It extends into business. It extends into how we treat one another in the quiet, everyday moments. A few heads nodded. Monica lowered the paper again. Innovation is not just about technology. It is about reimagining the assumptions we build into every interaction, rewriting the rules we never questioned. Because until we reimagine those, we are not building a better world. We're just dressing the old one in new colors. From the second row, an older man folded his arms slowly, leaning forward with interest. A young woman with a translator headset whispered something into her phone. The room was listening. Monica let her gaze move across the audience. Then she closed her folder. "I will not list statistics today. You already know the numbers. I will not dazzle you with jargon. You already speak the language. Instead, I will leave you with a question." She let the silence settle. Then she asked it. When was the last time you looked at someone in your industry and asked yourself what it cost them just to be allowed in the room? No one moved. Monica's voice dropped slightly. And what are you doing to make sure they don't have to keep paying? The room remained frozen. She gave a small nod. Thank you. Then she stepped back. The silence held for half a second longer before the applause began. It started as a soft ripple, then grew, and then it rose into a standing ovation. Not out of politeness, but out of understanding. Monica stepped off the stage and returned to the wings. Jordan met her there, his eyes wide, his hands clutched around the clipboard as if trying to contain the moment. They're going to talk about that speech for weeks, he whispered. Monica raised an eyebrow. That was not a speech. No. She smiled. That was a mirror. Backstage, a journalist from a global outlet approached. She was already live on Instagram, holding a phone and a microphone. Ms. Braithwaite, she said breathlessly. Would you be willing to speak to the incident on the flight? People are calling it a watershed moment. There's even a campaign now using your image, claim your seat. Monica considered the question, considered the crowd watching live, considered how many people were waiting for her to say something dramatic, to call someone out, to explain what had already been seen. She smiled gently. I think the flight already spoke for itself. She said. The journalist hesitated. But don't you want to say something? To clarify what you were feeling in that moment? Monica's eyes held steady. I was feeling everything, and I chose silence. She turned and walked away, leaving the cameras behind. As she exited through the rear hallway, she stepped into the cool Zurich air. The breeze carried the scent of pine and something fresh. She took a deep breath. The world was already spinning with headlines, hot takes, and analysis. But she didn't need any of it. She had already said what she needed to say. She had claimed her seat, and now she had claimed the room. The hotel suite was quiet. Monica Braithwaite stood by the window, the city of Zurich humming below her. The sun was beginning its slow descent behind the mountains, painting the sky in strokes of honey and rose gold. The curtains swayed slightly in the breeze from the cracked window. The only sound was the faint clink of a teaspoon in her teacup. She held the cup in both hands, letting the warmth settle between her palms. The conference had ended hours ago. Her speech had been clipped and posted in full. Her name was on the front page of international outlets. Even the New York Times had featured her on the homepage with the headline, The Woman in 3A. But here, in this quiet space, there was no applause, just breath and reflection. On the table beside her sat the folder she had carried throughout the journey. Neatly closed, inside it were her prepared remarks, her scribbled notes, and tucked in the back pocket, the folded page she had written on the plane. She had not looked at it again since Zurich. But now, with the city winding down and the day behind her, she reached for it. She unfolded the page slowly and ran her fingers over the words. We often speak of power like it lives in the loudest room. But it can also be a woman who chooses not to move when she knows she is already where she belongs. She read it again, then again, and finally, she smiled. It had never been about a seat. It had been about what the seat meant. It had meant decades of unspoken rules being rewritten in real time. It had meant watching a room full of people pretend not to see her, only to be forced to look. It had meant confronting her own exhaustion, the weariness of being expected to remain composed while being constantly challenged. The seat had meant more than comfort. It had meant being visible, and not because she raised her voice, but because she did not vanish. There was a knock at the door. Jordan stepped in a moment later with 2 cups of coffee and a newspaper tucked under his arm. He placed 1 cup on the side table and handed the paper to Monica. "You made page 1, twice." Monica accepted it and scanned the headlines. Her name, the incident, a new policy announcement from Skylux Airlines promising improved cultural sensitivity training and boarding protocols. The CEO of Skylux had issued a public statement earlier that day. It had gone viral as well, but she skipped over that part. She handed the paper back to Jordan and gestured toward the couch. He sat. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. They simply sipped and watched the sky. Then Jordan asked, "What are you going to do next?" Monica thought about it. She could give interviews, sit down with late-night hosts, write an op-ed, or she could simply keep doing what she had always done. Lead, build, show up. "I'm going to catch another flight," she said, half smiling. Jordan chuckled softly. "Of course you are." She looked out the window again. "But this time," she said, "I won't carry the weight of wondering if I belong. I've done that for long enough." Jordan nodded. The room was quiet again, but this time it was comfortable, a stillness that felt earned. Monica stood and walked over to her travel bag. She reached into the inner lining and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was a picture of her mother, younger, standing in front of the small house Monica had grown up in. Her mother was holding a mop in one hand and a set of textbooks in the other. She had worked nights as a janitor while attending night school. Monica used to sit on the steps, watching her come home exhausted but never defeated. Monica placed the photo on the table beside the tea. She thought of her daughter now, of the world her daughter would grow up in, different but not yet easy. And she thought about how many other women had faced their own versions of that flight, their own battles to be seen, to be heard, to be seated, and how many had stood silently, carrying their truths like stones in their chest. She picked up her pen one last time and wrote in the margin of the paper she had folded and unfolded all day. "This was never just about me. It never is." She looked up and spoke quietly. "We spend so much time teaching our daughters how to be strong," she said, "but we forget to teach the world not to test them so often." Jordan didn't respond. He just sat with the words. Let them breathe. Monica closed the folder gently and placed it in her briefcase. Her eyes lingered on the cup of tea, the newspaper, and the photograph before finally standing and walking toward the bedroom. At the door, she paused and turned back. "Book the next flight home," she said. "I want to wake up in my own city tomorrow." Jordan stood and grabbed his phone. Any preference on the airline? Monica raised an eyebrow. He nodded with a smirk. "Right. Consider it handled." She smiled. "Good night, Jordan." "Good night, Monica." The door clicked behind her, and just like that, the woman who refused to move had moved on. Not in defeat, but in victory. Not in noise, but in grace. Because power is not always loud. Sometimes it is simply a woman claiming the seat she earned and refusing to apologize for occupying it, and the world, finally, learning to adjust around her. Monica Braithwaite's story is a powerful reminder that dignity cannot be rented or revoked. It is a birthright too often denied by prejudice and ignorance. Her quiet strength forced an entire plane, and soon the world to confront uncomfortable truths about who is allowed to occupy space and why. This isn't just about one seat on a plane. It's about every moment in life when people are dismissed because of their skin, their gender, or their identity. It's about the courage it takes to remain composed and claim your place anyway. We must honor stories like Monica's not only to celebrate resilience but to expose and condemn the everyday acts of discrimination still too common today. If Monica's journey inspired you, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge, uplift, and change the way we see the world. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned. There are many more voices and stories coming your way. Together, we can keep the conversation alive.